Hi everyone, I hope you are doing good. So in the last video I mentioned you about the procurement to pay cycle, which is part of accounts, comes under the accounts payable. So today I will talk about that P2P cycle and in brief only. Okay, so you can have idea about what is P2P cycle. So the P2P cycle is the process from procuring goods until the payment is done. This is the basic thing, and under which we have many steps that we need to follow to ensure that we have procured the goods and payment is done. So what are the different steps? Let's take a look at those. First is definition of requirement. So first step begins what exactly are the requirements. Let's take one example. Where 100 laptops, so that's their requirement, and one department has raised a request that they need 100 laptops. So okay, so requirement, that is the requirement. Next step is source identification. So purchase the laptops from which vendor. So again there will be a whole process. It is done by a different team which is part of procurement. So they will try to identify different suitable vendors, take the quotations from various vendors, and will do some checks what are their prices. They will compare it with all other quotation, then they will finalize one vendor. So it is a we have vendor selection, that is a third step in the P2P cycle. Under vendor selection, we have multiple vendors. Now we have selected one, we have identified, that is vendor selection. What we will do, we will make our PO and we will forward it to vendor. That these PO is purchase order, these are our requirements. This is PO is basically the agreement between the buyer and seller. On what terms? It includes payment terms, the price of the goods, and the quantity, when the goods will be delivered, and I also mentioned you the payment terms. So these are the basic things which are mentioned on the PO, and it's an agreement between the buyer and seller. There are many more things, but these are the basic. Now we have selected the vendor, PO has been raised, and we have forwarded to the vendor. Next part is, okay, we will check order monitoring, whether like when we order something we keep a check. So where my order has arrived, where my order has reached, what its current status. So that comes under the part of order monitoring. Next we have is goods receipts. So we have received our goods. So goods will be received by the warehouse department. They have received the good, they will create one document, that is GRN, goods received note. It's a proof net goods have been received, and they will mention, let's say I have ordered 100 laptops, but instead I have received 90. So on the GRN they will mention that 90 laptops have been received at this price. So they will create a GRN. It's a proof that goods have been received, and it is done by the warehouse department. Name can be different depending upon the organization. Next is invoice processing. GR has been generated, and next thing we will do, we will post the invoice. Vendor has sent the invoice. Now we from here our actual work starts. There is a team for invoice processing. So I have received the invoice from vendor. Now I have to post that invoice in my system. Okay, so I mentioned you about the journal entry, like when we purchase goods on credit, so the journal entry would be purchase account debit to vendor or expense account debit to vendor. Now we will book that entry in our system, that is GRIR account debit to vendor account. In the, if you are that is a separate topic, I will cover it later. Okay, so you have in the invoice processing you have to make the check. Under this we have two-way match, three-way match, four-way match, and there is one blanket PO. Okay, so that's a different entire topic, I will cover that later on. So we will make a check. The general is three-way match. Under three-way match we check PO with the GRN and invoice, whether all three things have matched. If they are matched, we will post that invoice in our system. That is what we have to do. We have posted the invoice. Next thing with next process and step is payment. Now we have to make the payment to the vendor. That's the final step. We have procured the goods. End step, we have to make the payment to the vendor. So that is done by different team. Okay, so we have entirely different team for payment. So we will make the payment according to the payment terms. Payment terms are basically decided like when I have purchased goods today, so I will make the payment after 30 days. So these are the payment terms decided between the vendor and seller. Okay, let's say there is some query which vendor has to raise. So how he will contact? So for this, for any kind of problem at the end of vendor, so he will raise that query at the vendor help desk. So that is why we have this thing. So under this we have discussed to summarize this So to summarize this whole, we have determination, then PO processing, then fifth is order monitoring, sixth is good receipts and services in case of service, seventh is invoice processing in the system, and eighth is payment. So this is the whole P2P cycle. I just don't want this video to go lengthy, but I think when I have to explain something, so my video time when I have to explain who has given interview for this thing a few days back, so he shared his experience with me, and he told me that the questions that were asked that were general, which he had understand or studied in his training part. So giving any interview, then I would really love that you share your experience. Thank you, and I will share the PPT in the Telegram group.